So here's what's funny. I wanted to start getting back into teaching more classes more purposefully. And my wheelhouse is emotions and the Word of God. And so sometimes, well, they always go hand in hand, but really my sweet spot is teaching about emotions. And I like to come up with new ideas, new things to talk about. And so last time it was managing your emotions in hostile environments and yada, yada. This time I was thinking, you know what would be good? Let's talk about dealing with change. That'd be great. Our family has been through a lot of self-inflicted changes, changes that we thought of ourselves and or changes that came on us without warning. And as I was writing the class and thinking through this and praying through this, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I thought, I can't talk about dealing with change. That's a personality issue. If you are someone who hates change, that's hardwiring. I used to think up until really recently, and my daughter was like, yeah, Mom, I don't know what you're thinking. That's not a trauma or emotion situation. I've already advertised and there's people signed up for the class. So, you have two choices. Either cancel the class and say, hey guys, better luck next time. I'll think of a better topic. We'll meet up again in a couple weeks. Or in typical me, personality style, I was like, you know what, we're going to conquer this. We're going to talk about dealing with change in spite of the fact that it is indeed a personality thing. So I've got some notes that I do need to read from because this will keep me on track, because I can start talking about personalities and go, wait, why are we here? What are we talking about? When I began to think through teaching this class tonight, I really immediately regretted it. And not because I didn't want to teach the class. I just thought dealing with change and the level of difficulty is very specific to everyone's personality, as I just mentioned. In recent years, I've become more, to say more aware is a gross understatement, hyper aware of my personality and my children's individual personality. And Mark, before he passed, his personality, I was starting to learn a little bit more, which I always think, well, that would have been helpful about 22 years ago. But in dealing with personality, in dealing with change and thinking from the aspect of managing your emotions well, I probably should have clarified that as well. When you're dealing with change and managing emotions, my idea and bent is to always say, well, let's do this in a way that is with grace, and you're doing it well, and you feel like you're thriving in the midst of change. This, again, is all based on hardwiring. Not all. That was kind of an overstatement. Let me rephrase. It's really based on, to some extent, a big part of it on personality. There are a lot of personality tests out there, and some people subscribe to the DISC personality, the animal or whatever personality. If you're familiar with Young Living, then a lot of people do like the color personality. I don't know, there's a million and one different types of personalities. And I think sometimes, just if I can touch on that for a minute, the danger of knowing your personality and saying, well, I'm with this or I'm with that, is then it becomes our identity. And really, we're all created in the image of God, and He has all the personalities and just pours into us individually our hardwiring based on our gifts, our callings, meaning what we are meant to do while on this earth. Our personalities are never meant to be used as a crutch. Like, for example, I can be pretty straightforward. And so I might say, well, I'm just dominant. Sorry, that's my personality. I can learn to change and soften it, and have in my 48 years of being on this planet. That being said, when we talk about change, it's really important to know how you are hardwired. What is some, like, you know what, this is not going to change, right? Speaking of change. And then there's other things about personality that, environmental, nurture, and nature, right? Is it how you're hardwired? Is it how you're nurtured? Is it a little bit of both? Yes. The answer to that is yes. And when we think of managing our emotions as we deal with change in an ever-changing world, it's important to understand hardwiring versus software, I guess I should say. So in our ever-changing world, I think, talking about change, I feel like I'm saying the word change a lot, and that's kind of already driving me nuts. But in a world where change is truly inevitable, one would think that we all, no matter our hardwiring, would be able to just soar through change, right? I mean, yet here we are. There's, tons of people on this class and signed up for a later class or to watch it offline because we have a hard time dealing with change. And when we look back, just, step back a couple of years and think, well, why did everybody have a full-blown come apart? Well, by and large, a lot of it had to do with change. And again, if you're hardwired a certain way, there's a huge group of individuals in this world that frankly don't care for change and are hardwired to be adaptable and go along with the flow and really keep things status quo and are totally at peace with that. And then you come in and somebody messes with it and shakes it up and it's like, wow, that's not cool. So in an ever-changing world, and we know that it's inevitable that we at some point will have to change whatever it is, whether it's our route to work or what we wear because it's seasonal. I'll get to that in a minute. I actually do have a funny story about that. It's really important that we understand change will come. It just will. Change is one of the few constants outside of God that we have. And so knowing that it's going to come, and if you're someone who doesn't care for change, either A, learning how to adapt, or B, understanding that maybe, just maybe, there could be an emotional component that rubs you wrong with change, if that makes sense. So I mentioned that I became hyper aware of my kids' personality, right? And how they're hardwired. And that is so helpful when you have 5 of them. You think that 2 people who had 5 children, at least some of them would be the same. They are similar, but none of them are the same. And nor are any of them exactly like me or their dad, which would make life so much easier, right? But I started studying personalities and understanding, okay, this is what happens in certain stressful situations. So I'm going to have you guys write down a couple of things. I mean, it's not like I know that you're taking notes, you're not taking notes, but I'm just going to say, I encourage you to take notes. I talk a lot about journaling in all my emotion classes, and it's a hill that I'm not going to say I die on because that, outside of the Lord, nothing's really worth dying for, right? But I will say it is a bone that I will not give up. Journaling helps you assess what it is and what it is not. Journaling helps you mentally process it out with seeing it in front of your eyes versus having it all trapped up in your head. So at minimum tonight, I would strongly encourage you to take notes. So number 1, definitely the thing to do is learn your personality. Just learn it. And with the idea, here's the caveat, relearn your personality. If you already know, well, I'm a this, I think one of the most common ones, especially for people like me who are emotion coaches, is we talk about the DISC personality, and it's dominant. It's the only one I know because that's one of my main things. Sorry, it's DISC, right? And in any case, you might think you know what you are, but it's really important to go back and see, okay, now how am I? And understand that this is how God wired you, and there's room for growth. There's room to learn. So when you understand your personality, you can know there's areas where there's some wiggle room. There's places that I can adapt. So as we start to talk about managing emotions through change in an ever-changing world, know that there must be a willingness here to adapt. Okay, I'm gonna let that sink in just a moment. So the willingness to adapt, to look for the proverbial silver lining, to continue on your path that you were called to do in spite of an ever-changing world. Lisa, I do not have a link to it. I don't have a link to it right now. I can look for one and I can message that along. I will message that along in the links, or excuse me, the recording. So make a mental note here. So it's obviously no surprise that I'm I love change. It's super fun for me. but here we go. I'm going to share with you a couple of hard wirings, and in your mind, this is number 2. Be thinking about what you sound like. Which, like, can you relate to me? Which one of my kids can you relate to? Again, this is not the hard and fast. I'm not even going to tell you what each of our personality is. It's just sort of to help you understand as I talk about, okay, now that you know this is this, let's talk about some tools and some tips on how to deal with change. So for those of you who are hardwired like me, change is an absolute blast. People like me absolutely crave change. And that might sound weird and terrifying to you guys, but it's truth. And when I was talking to my daughter about this earlier tonight, even, she said, Mom, I've just learned that living with you as a mom, change is inevitable. She's like, I would not be surprised if you woke us up tomorrow and said, okay, today we're moving to Guatemala. And I'm like, that actually would be really cool. And she's going, oh gosh, okay, I shouldn't have said anything, right? That's just how I am. I love it. Hardwiring, I'm not sure. I grew up military and we travel a lot. And so that was really fun, lived in different countries. And I don't know, it doesn't matter why, it is what it is. So I see that people with my personality, if you are resonating with me at all, we see it as a challenge when change comes, something to conquer, maybe learning new ways to make it fun. That's also a big part of my personality, is fun, being a fun junkie. So for example, when 2020 started to hit, for me, I was like, all right, you know what? You're not letting me out of my house. So I'm going to make it totally fun. I'm going to not talk about emotions or young living. I'm going to tell people about how to, they're going to be sitting at home. Like, let's talk about how to wear the right hairstyle. What is good for you? Just silly things, like making it fun. It was annoying, as all changes can be sometimes, and maybe a little bit triggering. But in the end, I immediately started looking for ways to beat the change, to make it work for me instead of working against me. So some of you are like that and you super love change. And so I might say to you, why are you on this call? I mean, I'm grateful that you're here, but probably if you like change, dealing with it is not necessarily something that you need help with. Maybe if it's to share with somebody else, if you do what I do, like, oh, so-and-so needs to hear this message. Anyway, there's others who maybe are more hardwired, like my oldest daughter. She's my sounding board. She's the one that I bounce things off of all the time. So I often talk about her because she is so incredible and so incredibly patient with her mother. So change for her, and this might be you, so see if you can hear yourself in this. Change for her is tolerable. She doesn't hate it. She doesn't love it. She just, it is what it is. Somebody said that tonight, and I giggled because I'm like, yeah, that's definitely thumbs up. Eden is, change happens. It is what it is. She has a very adaptable personality. She actually gets that from her dad. My husband was not a super big fan of change, but pretty quickly in our marriage, he learned, okay, to have some peace, he's going to need to start to adapt, which is one of his strengths. So there's like the personality and the strength finders, if you're familiar with that. In any case, someone like her, if you're like her, you may tolerate change. It may not be your favorite. It might, again, be more annoying because it disrupts your routine, but you pretty quickly say, okay, I can deal with this, and learn for ways to manage it, right? In the case of my daughter, having a mother like me has helped her adapt super quick. And now she has her own tools to deal with it. Life comes at her fast and furious, just living in our family and the things that we've gone through, the things that we're called to. So if that's you and things just come at you fast and furious and you're a tolerable temperament for change, we'll deal with that. But my advice is definitely keep an open mind, open heart on some ways that you can thrive. Now the other, so I'll share my youngest two, and then I'll get to my oldest, who I suspect most people tend to be like, given what I see on a daily basis with social media. So my youngest two, changes, again, not a huge deal, yet it is a huge deal if they were not the catalyst for it, which might make it sound like change is a big deal. It is not if it's their idea, if that makes sense. So if that's you, you're like, well, I don't mind change as long as I it was my idea to change. You know, how, like we'll talk about in a minute, though, some change can be stressful. So we'll figure out, okay, we might need some tools for that. And if it's not your idea, well, now change is just completely egregious. But if it is your idea and you feel like it's good, then yay. For them, one of the things that I have adapted to for me is I will give them a heads up. I give them an excellent explanation on why things are changing, and then they can handle it. And you might resonate too with that, because if you are someone who is like, I don't like this, it's not my idea, but if somebody gives you a really good explanation on why it needs to be this way, then you might be all set. Okay, so the last one is my oldest son. I talk about him a lot in a lot of my emotion classes. He is one who sent us kind of into the launching of talking about emotions, really the launching of all of our healthy lifestyle and all of that. But for him, change is horrifying, absolutely terrifying. He's almost 21. It has not gotten better in his mind. He just knows how to cope with it. And that, honestly, when I think about this class, I think about him. And if you're someone who just loathes change, just completely horrific to think about having to change, my prayer and my hope is that you can become like him, and at least knowing that you may not ever like it, but you can adapt and you can grow through it and you can be strong in it, because life is going to change. I can guarantee. So you might as well not be miserable, right? As it does. So for Zion, when he was little, I was telling the kids this the other day, and the younger ones didn't know this because they obviously weren't born then. And to some extent, he's still this way. But when he was little, changing seasons was really challenging. I don't know if anybody as an adult is like this now, but he couldn't necessarily go from shorts weather to pants weather and vice versa, simply because like the wearing of long sleeves or long pants after 4 or 5 months of wearing short sleeves and short pants was difficult. Just the feeling on his legs. And it was like, but this is what I always wear. I always wear these clothes, you know, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And so that's tricky. So that might sound kind of silly, but some of you I know are going, yeah, totally. I can relate. He definitely likes to sit at the same spot at the table. The other kids get frustrated. They're like, oh, he's so demanding. It's like, no, that actually just helps him feel better because this is his spot, quote unquote. He eats the same exact lunch. And again, at 20, almost 21, with a couple variations, which we always laugh, like, wow, Zion's eating something different. Well done. And finally, he has this trusty backpack that he's had since the first grade, because it's in excellent condition and he sees no need to get a new one. It's like, why would I do that? This is my backpack. So for those of you who are hardwired like that child, you can understand, I can understand and completely see how change could be pesky at best, and how dealing with change, managing your emotions through that can be somewhat of a challenge. So realizing that challenge with change is a personality issue, when I started teaching or thinking about this class, gave me just a mild panic attack. Because how does someone like me, I just shared with you how I'm hardwired, right, help you who might be hardwired like my son, or maybe even my daughter, but really even if it's my son, how do I even begin to tell you, well, embrace change. Change is fun. Come on, you're going to love this. Yeah, you might go, no, that's not a thing. Because even if it's change that you want, like you sell your house because you want to, and you buy a new house because you want to, even that can be stressful. So I might be able to say, hey, even some painful change can turn out for the best in the end. But that is really the same as telling someone who's having a full-blown freak out moment in the middle of it to just calm down. That's not a thing. That's, so, and given within each personality, there are varied degrees of what makes change a catalyst for resistance. So, of course, I had 2 choices. I can just, like I say, I just apologize. We're going to do this another time, or rise to the challenge and hopefully give you some tips for each of these. And of course, here we are. You see my choice. given that I have walked 4 very different temperaments through all manner of change, I like to think of myself quite highly, I guess, but I like to think of myself as someone who is a bit of an expert advice giver. Now, I say that I'm an expert advice giver because I can tell all the things that can help, and it's really up to the person to choose to use them. There's many times when I share with my children or even coaching clients or people who message me online, I'll say, this is what I think, you asked, and it's totally up to you for the advice. So here you are, you're in this class. Everything I say is subject to work, whether or not you implement it. I recently had a situation where someone had asked for some, help. What's a good oil for this and such situation? And I had been talking to this gal for several years about emotions. And I said, look, I feel like we're past me saying like, hey, why don't you use this oil for that? This isn't like your daily horoscope. I'm having a cloudy with a chance of resting bee face for these people. So what's a good oil for that? Sometimes we have to get down to it and start dealing with our stuff, right? So when we think about dealing with our emotions and change and all of that, again, the personalities, this is a lot of this is, here's some advice. I can give a lot of good advice, but this is a partnership. You guys have to take it to create some change. Okay. So for those of you guys who are like me, again, I said this a minute ago, but I'll say it again. I'm not sure why you would be here. Maybe I'm just going to give you a little pep talk. Like you're doing great. You got this. But if you have that personality that you love change, but some change is difficult, some changes that you've walked through, maybe you've had a loss, a job loss, anything significant like that, and you're feeling like it's a little sticky, you've got some sticking points, I'm going to offer and just say, this might be the time, just like my friend who was like, hey, what oil for this and such situation? This might be the time for you to dive into your emotions, to the ones that are causing you to not function at your best. Because if you're somebody who enjoys change, but there's some sticking points, there's probably some underlying trauma, some resistance that is starting to creep in. And here's the deal, with 2020, that just sort of laid everybody bare and ripped open all their ugly scabs. And what I noticed and what I saw is people got into causes that gave them something to work for, to root for, to shoot for, something they can control, because their whole world was out of control. Some people dove headlong into politics thinking that was the situation. Some dove headlong into, I want to say justice, but that's not the word, social justice, that type of thing. So just know that there could be some underlying stuff, right? Okay. So for the rest of you who are not like my personality and you're like, okay, I love change, or I don't really care for change, or I tolerate change, or whatever. The goal now, what I have for you for these next few minutes that we're together, is to give you some tools and some things so that you can tell yourself, or some things that you can tell yourself rather, so that you can get to a peaceable place quicker through the change. And you'll hear me say this time and time again, that the time to prepare for war is not during a war. The time to prepare is at times of peace. If right now, right this moment, your life is peaceful, and you might be experiencing like a little bit of change or a little bit of emotional unrest, then now would be the time to start learning how to manage and putting your tools and the tips I shared tonight into practice. The time to deal with that, to learn, is not in a crisis time, right? Learning how to deal with change, the time would not be in the middle of a move or in the middle of a loss. That's like your coping time. And so what I mean by that is, if you start practicing now and you put these things into practice, breathing, as we'll talk about, removing certain words, we'll talk about in a minute, starting now when things are somewhat at peace or mostly at peace, when that time comes for war or change, I should say in a more drastic fashion, it'll become automatic. You won't be grasping. You won't be messaging me saying, I have this terrible situation. What oil do I use? We got to stop using oils as our Band-Aid. We really need to start using them as the healing tools that they were created to be, and graduating out of those. I realized I just said that and thought, yeah, I'm going to say that again. So we need to start graduating out of certain oils. Okay. An oil like, let me back up. Oils like release, forgiveness, inner harmony or harmony, those things are great for a season. But when we have to keep going back, then we have to remember there might be some deeper work to be done. We'll say that. Okay, so here's some tips. Ready? Here we go. So we said like 1, number 2, I think, what are we on? Number 3. Number 1 for the tips. These are like subheadings. Number 1, tips and tools. Know your personality and understand yourself. I've been talking about personality now for about 30 minutes. I think I've gotten the point to beat the proverbial dead horse. However, between this, breathing, and journaling, I cannot stress this enough. Know your personality and understand yourself. Become more self-aware rather than simply stating, I don't like change. It's kind of like the person who says, well, I'm an introvert and I don't really like people. Like, no, actually, you've probably been hurt by people, because introverts by nature don't necessarily, the definition isn't that they don't like people. It's just that they get more energized when they have some alone time, some regrouping time, and being with people takes a lot of energy out of them. That doesn't mean they don't like people. So see, there's a difference. So if you say, well, I don't like change, I would have to say to you, well, do you not like life? Because life is ever changing. So see, when you start to ask a little bit harder questions, you start to become more conscious of your wording. And then I would hope the next step is maybe rephrase it. Becoming more self-aware rather than saying, I don't like change. Maybe we can say change is uncomfortable and I'm learning to grow in it. Right? And understanding why. Now, from there, number 2 would be ask yourself a couple of questions. So here's the questions. Why does change feel difficult? Why does it feel like a challenge? Hardwiring, yes, just talked about that to the nth degree, but what are you hardwired for? So routines, what routines can you put in place that can create peace within yourself and without? Meaning, if you're somebody who's like, change it feels uncomfortable and it's not my favorite. So what does make me feel comfortable is this, this, and this. So when change comes, is it possible to do this, this, and this? For example, let's say, for my son, 2020 was really difficult because it was his first year of college. He did 1 semester of college in person, and then they quickly switched over to online. So he was like, wait, how am I going to communicate with my professors? How am I going to get interaction and all of these things? So we walked through and said, okay, what are some needs that you have? Right? He understood himself. He knows his personality. He knows what makes him tick. You know what I'm saying? Like, so going back to, okay, why is this difficult? This particular situation, not change. I should rephrase that. Why is the particular change feeling like a challenge? Because then you can say, well, not all change is bad, right? Some is good, but going through and saying, why is this particular one? And then you can walk through there. Now, number 3 is a sort of addition to that. Remove the words difficult, easy, and hard. I know I just was saying difficult because that's how everybody thinks about it. But now, from now on, I'm going to challenge you to remove, when we think about really anything, any task, the words difficult and the words hard, and of course, easy. Here's why. Your mind, my mind, it's got a lot to do. The brain has a big old job. It's always looking for a simple or more easier way. It's looking for the shortest route. It doesn't want to have to build a new bridge to get to where it needs to go. It has a lot to think about, to do, a lot of communication needs to happen. So it will always look for the shortest cut. When your mouth says difficult, easy, and hard, out of those three, which is the one it's going to choose? And then out of those three, which are the two it's going to resist you on? So if you say this is hard or difficult, your mind will resist virtually anything that is difficult or hard. That doesn't mean you won't do it. It's just immediately you're going to hit the brakes, right? It's like a dog that doesn't want to go for a walk. It's like, wait, what? And then you have to talk yourself into it. So instead, consider with me a verbiage upgrade. Something that has to do with more how you feel about the situation. This is, after all, an emotion class. How you feel about a situation. So is the situation you're in, is it annoying? I mean, we can be like little kids and say, well, I just don't like it. Well, why don't you like it? I did this with my children when they were little with food. Why don't you like those green beans? What do they taste like to you? Come on, don't just say they're gross. We can do better than that. Well, it tastes a little squishy. Okay, maybe I overcooked it. I don't like the texture of it, right? We start to dive in and say, okay, well, you're not just being picky. There's an actual tangible reason why this is hard for you, difficult, whatever. So I'm attempting to take those out of my own vocabulary. Ask why you're feeling a certain way, right? So let's say, this particular change, I feel sad in this change. Okay. What's at the root of that sadness? Is there sometimes I get sad when I'm not in control. My personality likes control. It's just fun for me. I like to be the boss. I'm an only child. I mean, come on now. I was made for this. So that's that. Or is this inconvenient? Your route to work might be disrupted. That right there, that small thing can be a huge deal breaker for someone's day. If you have to take a different route, then it's like, well, why? Well, is it inconvenience? Ask questions. When you ask questions, you're able to get to the root of why, and then you're able to have more control and more power in the situation. And you can now, remember, we talked about doing some things that help you feel comfortable, feel safe, feel in control, feel more at ease in the midst of change. Perhaps it is an unexpected move. I talk about moves a lot because my family, I swear, we move all the time. Perhaps it's unexpected. Again, is there grief? Is there sadness? Is it a different grocery store? When I moved to Texas, I thought, my God, how do you people buy food? I only know how to shop at Trader Joe's. Literally, it's the only store I ever shopped at. And so going to these stores like Kroger, which was the equivalent of our Ralph's, I think, or Vaughn's or something in California, I'm like, I don't even know what kind of food they have here. That was really hard. That can create some stress. And it's like, I need to feed my family. And I know it sounds silly about food, but Trader Joe's is crazy cheap. So, and Kroger is crazy not. Discovering what emotions are rooted in the resistance will help you process it quicker. I'm always about, let's get to the emotional root of this, because I promise you, as sure as I'm sitting here, the minute you can get to the emotional root of it, the moment you can step back and take an introspective look at yourself, which I know for some personality types, you guys don't do that, which I just learned this recently. I was astounded. Wait, not everybody self-examines. I guess not. And that's cool. But now it's time. It's time to stop and go, you know what I do? I need to do this so that I can process it quicker, so that I can get to a more peaceable place through change quicker. Number 4 is recognize there is an element of grief to any and every change. There is an element of grief to any and every change. And it's time to learn how to process grief effectively. I've mentioned on many occasions that there is no one silver bullet. Lord, I wish, for processing grief. But doing it effectively also has to do with your personality. I share a lot of my personal stories because it gives you a good kind of an insight. It's not because I super love talking about myself. I actually rather grow weary of hearing my own stories. But if I told you about other people, then I'm talking about somebody else in front of their face or behind their back. So I just share this as I share yet another story about emotions in my family or myself. But obviously, as many of you know, we are now in month 7 of grief, losing my husband, the kids losing their dad. And for someone like me, I enjoy working, I enjoy moving, I enjoy doing. And I'm in a situation where I'm like, I feel like I'm not sure what to do with my hands. Other personalities will say to me, well, you need to grieve. This is your time to take it easy and relax and rest. And that's actually worse for me that's not how I want to process the grief. But maybe somebody else, like, no, they need to pull in, they need to take some time, they need to just hunker down with family, maybe go on a trip, take longer walks. Do you see what I'm saying? Some people process it differently. So when I say to you, the masses, it's time to learn to process grief effectively, please know there is no one way to process grief or sadness or change, for that matter. It's just learning what works for you. On a social media post recently, I shared removing difficult and hard, or easy and hard, something like that, and thinking in terms of right and wrong, and not a moral right and wrong. That's for another time and another place. But is it right for you to process your grief in this way, or is it quote unquote wrong for you because of how you're hardwired? Just because someone posts a quippy meme on Instagram or Snapchat or whatever, and you're like, oh yeah, that sounds good. It might sound good, but is it for you? It's really interesting when you start to process things like that, right? Number 5 would be all change. Understand this. This is something to understand. Then we'll talk about a little bit about stress. But understand that all change creates an element of stress. Good change can create an element of stress. Now, stress has such a bad connotation in our world, but there's good stress and then there's bad stress. And even bad stress can become good stress depending on how we deal with it. And good stress can become bad stress depending on how we deal with it. Do you follow? So how do you respond to stress now? That's something to write down. Take a minute to just answer that question very candidly. In the moment, right now, when I say the question, how do you respond to stress? The first thing that comes to your mind is, and write that down. Because if I were to ask you and gave you a second to think about it, you're going to answer me or answer yourself, because this is not a dialogue, right? You're going to answer yourself in the way that you want to. Unless you're totally self-aware and reflective and say, yeah, I'm not good, or no, I actually do really well with it because I do X, Y, Z, da, 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 which again, I would ask, why are you on here? I mean, yay, I'm grateful that you're here, but maybe there's something else you could be working on. But most people who sit in any of my emotion classes still struggle with a little bit of element of dealing with stress. They don't breathe. I can't say it enough to all humans. Breathe. We need to breathe. If you were here for the last class, we talked about hostile environments, managing emotion in hostile environments. I shared about how to breathe. Breathe from your belly. Deep, cleansing breaths. On my watch, several times a day, and I realized my daughter and I, our watches are synced up or something, because all of a sudden it'll tell us to breathe. It tells me to breathe. And I'm like, how is it that our world, I have to have a freaking watch to tell me to breathe? But that just tells me that our world doesn't handle stress very well. We have to have a reminder on it to breathe. So these are some beneficial responses to stress that you can implement, and stress and grief, they go hand in hand as far as our response, and you can use these to help you kind of kickstart grief processing rather more effectively. Yeah, I think this will help. Okay, so breathe. The next thing is think it through. Think it through. think it through. The change, what's happening in our world. And it's only getting worse and worse. I see it. I'm a people watcher from way back. I was a hairdresser for 100 years. I can't help myself. Humans fascinate me. But I see it more and more. We react. Few respond. Few think it through. Don't say that as a criticism. I say that as an awareness to help you personally understand how do you deal with the rest of the environment around you. How do you deal with change? Do you react? Meaning, do you fly off the handle and have a very quick, I shouldn't say response, it's not a response, but a quick word. Do you breathe? Are your emotions more elevated or are they more calm? What is your voice tempo? So when change comes at you and it's not your choice and it's time to change, do you think it through? Do you ask the question, okay, is this a good change? Is this a not so great change? Would I have chosen this on my own? Okay, now that I see this, what would be the best way to respond? Thinking about essential oil usage. There's oils for all manner of different changes, right? So what oils would be good for this situation in this particular change? Reacting versus responding, right? Thinking it through helps us respond versus reacting. Thinking it through helps us respond versus react. When we respond, we can breathe. When we breathe, we oxygenate our brain. We just automatically bring oxygen to our beautiful mind and brain so that we can start to see things for what they are and what they are not. The fourth thing is to have your essential oil arsenal at the ready. By now, if you sit in a class with me, you know I'm going to talk about oils. And if you're not using essential oils for your emotional well-being, which dealing with change, it obviously is an emotional issue, whether it's anything negative or positive, it has to do with emotions, right? So by now, you know this is that. I'm gesturing to all my oils that are right here. And then knowing how to use them. Essential oils are not a Band-Aid, but more of a healing tool. These oils can help your brain think even more clearly so that you can now respond better. These oils can help remove the sting off of change that was not as fun, can help soothe any grief that you're feeling, any sadness. They can also ignite when you're like digging your heels in and say, I don't really want to go forward. There's oils for that. But again, knowing your personality, I'm telling you, I should teach a class on personalities if I knew that much about them. But I'm thinking, man, this is cool. It goes right along with the oils. So all of us enjoy different oils, but knowing your personality and your bents and your likes and your dislikes and how you respond and what makes you react versus, bringing up the response easier. Knowing all of that will help you choose your oils. Did you know that? So when you say, hey, what's a good oil for grief? Well, my word, let's look in our apps. If you guys use oils, I'm just going to do this right now because I think someone needs to see this. There's a reference guide for essential oils. I just like to use it. I used to use it all the time, but now I'm like, but I know these so well. Let me just have a little bit of a lazy moment and go to anger. It's in the A's, right? Alphabetical. Let's see. Good oil for anger. There are about 30 oils listed. So if you are saying this change makes me angry, or it doesn't make me, you can agree with the anger. I feel angry when I'm experiencing this change, and you look at this app or you ask me or somebody that you trust, well, what's a good oil for anger? I don't know. We've got lavender, ylang ylang, rose, melissa, tranquil, orange, peace and calming, Australian blue, bergamot, cedarwood, cypress, forgiveness, frankincense, geranium, German chamomile, grounding, joy, harmony, and I could go on, but I won't. Our oils, we will respond better to our oils based on how we're hardwired. And why is there anger? Do you feel anger and a change because of things that are going on and you're frustrated with a person, a situation, a people group? Maybe there's room for forgiveness there. Not ready to forgive? Okay. Well, maybe we just need to deal with some tranquil, right? It just, again, it depends on your bent. I'm so glad I thought of that. That was definitely a God thing right there, thinking about that. Knowing your personality will help you choose better. Essential oils are not a one size fits all. They are not a magic bullet. They just aren't. They respond differently to each of our DNAs. The oils are designed, the blends rather, for certain ideas and thoughts in mind, but you'll notice there's several oils that do the same thing. There's several oils for the same emotion or the same whatever. The last thing is processing the grief is so important. You, me, our world, we would be wise to become okay with processing grief and recognizing that there is that element in every amount of change. Once we can wrap our minds around that there is an element of grief and likely some sadness, then you're able to better understand how to walk through it and deal with change, manage your emotions in an ever-changing world, in a way that you thrive, in a way that you are stronger for it, and not allowing roots of bitterness and resentment to grow up in the midst of those changes. I said that was going to be the last thing, but somebody needs to hear this. In light of 2020, and I'm thinking that this is going to be the last time, I'm going to just refer back to that because I feel like we are living in the past way too much. But in light of that, here's the last question I'd like for you to ask yourself. Do you have bitterness and resentment that has taken root because of the events of that year? Really, ask yourself honestly. Do you resent other humans? Do you resent government authorities and officials? I don't know. I feel like somebody needs to ask themselves that question. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I doubt it. I talk to enough people and I can hear the resentment and the bitterness in their words. Some of you understand what this means, but when you talk to people and you hear for more than just words, you start to hear the intention and the weight of their words. If you say yes to any of that, any resentment, any bitterness, maybe starting there, dealing with any negative effects of changes that you've had to go through, things that have been forced on you, that maybe you haven't held or handled as well as you could have, will help going forward, dealing with change in an ever-changing world in a way that you do prosper and grow and soar. Thank you so much for watching this later, for being on here live with me. You know where I am if you have any questions. I'm happy to help you with any of this process.